As always, it's a thrill to know that you can come back to hear the story. This book is called The Flower of Freedom, and all rights to the book and to my presentation are reserved. The book was built chapter by chapter, so the listener would benefit from listening to the chapters chronologically. You will find previous chapters on the website. We're now at chapter 5. That's called Teamwork of The Flower of Freedom by Deborah J. Reeves. Chapter 5, Teamwork. Colette stayed in the hospital for almost a week, as was the norm at the time. While she was away, Oscar and Anne-Marie assembled the cribs, washed the baby clothing, and prepared meals for the freezer. None of them had a family, so it was a whole new adventure for all of them. One day, while visiting them at the hospital, Anne-Marie asked which apartment they planned to take the baby home to. You know you love each other. Why don't you? Don't you think it's time you stopped pretending and started being a real family? She asked. She could sometimes be so forward. After a weighty pause, Oscar spoke up and said, "It's absolutely true. I do love you, and it would be my greatest wish to have both of you home with me. I've taken extra vacation so that I can be with you, but I do not want this if it's not what you truly want." It was settled when his wife admitted that she loved him too. She found her courage and she said, "Forever." Anne-Marie went to the nurse's station and asked if there was a priest that could attend the room. Within an hour, Father Joe appeared, and he heard their whole story under the seal of the confessional. He performed a marriage on the spot. There was no need for further paperwork. It would just confuse things, he said. Now they were truly married in the sight of God. Go forth and multiply, he said, with a grin, and that became Anne-Marie's favorite joke. A crib was moved to Oscar's apartment, and soon it had an occupant named Bertie. The three adults strove to keep up with the demands of one mighty little pair of lungs. Neighbors complained and knocked on the walls, but it did not influence Bertie in the least. Some nights he slept at Anne-Marie's place to give the tired parents a break. She told them that she had to practice, and they knew that she was just being merciful on them. Not quite 2 weeks after Bertie was born, Anne-Marie woke them up at midnight with another phone call. She said, "I'm sorry to call so late. Can you call me a cab? It's time. Please do not wake the baby. I can go by myself, and you can come and meet us in the morning. I just did not want to worry you about where I was." "That's nonsense," said Oscar after he had hung up. "Except the part about you coming with Bertie in the morning. That part's right. I'll take Anne-Marie. She cannot go alone." And that is what they did. Dr. Donovan met them at the hospital at 1 when the nurses had completed the initial check and paperwork. "Please come right away," they told him, and he did. Oscar explained that he was not the father. The father had been killed in the war. Anne-Marie, a widow, was his wife's sister, and they lived in the same apartment building. His wife had given birth at this hospital about 2 weeks ago, he reminded them. Some of the night nurses remembered the lovely French girl. Oscar was ushered into the waiting room, and there he waited. At 7 the next morning, he called his wife to tell her that he still had heard nothing. He promised to keep her posted. Remember, though, that deliveries can take a really long time, so don't worry. "How's Bertie this morning?" he asked, and Bertie responded that he was as loud as ever. Oscar hung up the payphone, smiling. Not long after that, the nurse came to the waiting room, and she called for him to follow her. This is not the way it goes, he thought, and his feet began to feel like lead. He followed the nurse to an office. The doctor that the girls adored was sitting behind the desk. "Oscar," he said, "I'm Dr. Donovan. We met when your son was born." And Oscar knew what was coming. He had heard that tone on the front lines of battle when one of his friends had been killed. His mind wandered and came back in time to hear the doctor say, "She's a fine, healthy little girl, but I need to know if I have to call Children's Services or if you and your wife are willing to adopt her." It's all Anne-Marie kept repeating at the end when it became clear that there was nothing anyone could do. She was a fighter, the likes of which I've seldom seen, but that condition is almost a foregone conclusion. She said that she had no one but you and your wife. She kept saying that she wanted you and your wife to have the baby and that her name was Marie. "Tell her that I love her with my whole heart," were the exact words she used. "Both the nurse and I will put Anne-Marie's dying declaration on paper for the adoption if you're willing." Oscar looked at the doctor. "No question, she's ours. Marie is ours, and I will take her home. When can I take her home? Can I take her with me now?" he asked in a clearly devastated tone. There was a solidity to Oscar. The young women had confided their story to the doctor that they trusted so deeply. He's like fine marble. The devastations of life seemed to make his fine qualities stand out more and more obviously as everything around him wears away with the torrents and storms of life. "I'll keep track of his little family, and I'll help them when I can," thought Dr. Donovan. That's the end of Chapter 5. I hope you'll come back for Chapter 6. Take care. Yours truly, Deborah.